Welcome to episode 1 of the SoundStage, the official College of Charleston Film Club podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Bristol Barnes,
Keller Hollingsworth,
and Max Meyers.
And today we're going to be talking about Jordan Peele's Nope and its commentary on spectacle cinema.
Yeah, I honestly feel like there was just a lot of hype built up around Nope. I feel like Jordan Peele was among like this group of directors. It was like him and like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers and you could say Greta Gerwig and a few other of these directors who had these like two knock it out of the park movies, and they're all kind of coming back with their third one, and this was his one. And I feel like he had already just kind of put himself in this really well-respected group. So I was really excited for what was to come, and I thought it was great.
Yeah, there's no question now that he's a generational director. He has certainly proven his talent.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw that really funny thing people were talking about online where some people were like, Jordan Peele is one of the best horror directors of all time. If you're like, he's made 3 movies, which I also agree with. I think all 3 have been fantastic, and I'm really excited for what's to come, but it's funny for people to be like, everyone before him is nothing. He's the best one.
I mean, honestly, I think I see a realistic future in like 20 years where he's on that pedestal.
He's gonna go down in the film history books. Get Out was just, as a debut, insane. And he's crazy and I love him.
I still just can't believe that he remade Jaws. Because I mean that's what like structure wise, that's what Nope is.
Yeah. It has been compared so heavily to Spielberg, and Max and I watched Close Encounters.
Yeah.
Right?
We watched it like, I think, was it after you had seen it?
It was after I had seen it
and
before you had seen it.
Yeah.
And I watched Nope with my coworkers like the night that the like digital copy was like allowed to be played, like right at midnight. It was like midnight of that Wednesday. It was like, okay, and now we can watch it, like it's unlocked. And so we watched it before anyone else, and it was so fun. And like we're going straight out of it, and one of my coworkers was like, very Spielberg. And I was like, I don't know anything about movies, but yeah. So, but definitely compared to Close Encounters, it makes a lot of sense. I see it a lot, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was just awesome. Like, I remember like watching it, and I was like, I guess maybe I was expecting it to be like really scary, and I wouldn't say it was necessarily scary, but it was just so thrilling and so suspenseful and just so like I feel like one of the things you could say with Jordan Peele already is that he knows suspense. Like that is like his like forte, I would say right now.
What blew me away is the whole first act, he's like building on things, and he's clearly like establishing all of these, I don't want to say rules, but like all of these things that then fully came full circle later in the movie. And like, so for the first act, you're kind of left wondering, like, oh, like, where is this going? Like, what's going to happen? But then once everything like starts to conclude, everything mattered. Like everything you saw earlier has a tie back in later on in the movie, which is just really efficient and like really impressive. I know that a lot of people who like, didn't get it, were annoyed by that first act. They're like, oh, it's slow. This isn't scary. What is going on? I want to see aliens. But yeah. I thought that was like, looking back on it, that stuff, that like build up was one of the coolest parts.
Yeah, and I love that it's so aesthetically specific. Like, I think the combination, and it just all makes sense together, that it's crazy, because the combination of like what it's in California, like in the desert, and having the like blow up guys from the car dealership and like the horses and just the Western vibe of it. I don't know. Everything is just so, and something that stuck with me very much after the first viewing was also like, and I guess this can be a good segue, what does the whole Gordy's place thing have to do with it? Because I could not stop thinking about it after watching it. I must have stayed up like an hour and a half after leaving work at like 2 a.m. just being like, what is... And I mulled it over and I watched it a second time, and I was like, I think it directly ties into the commentary about like, whenever you try to put certain things on film that obviously shouldn't be on film, there's always going to be consequences. Like, it's a little more of a specific example opposed to like the alien, them filming the alien, but like a wild animal that's always going to be a wild animal. You put a camera in front of it and you pop a balloon and it just goes crazy and murders a bunch of people. Like it's a more realistic example. But it's definitely what the theme is trying to say, I think, in a very poignant, in a way that you don't think about until afterwards, I feel like.
And I definitely think, he knew what he wanted to say, and I feel like he has a very reputable voice to say this. Like, I feel like, even if you really didn't know a lot about Jordan Peele, watching his movies, you can tell that he loves film. Like, sure, he's got his background with, like, Comedy Central, and a ton of that, just, like, making film, but, like, as, like, a cinephile, I think you can certainly see that, like, not only is this about, like, the movie's about, like, these folks who have this, like, horse rental company for Hollywood, but there's, like, so many references littered in there, and so many just, like, I don't know, like, oozes with that love for film. Like, there's, like, the Akira slide, and a ton of that stuff. So it's like, when you hear someone who not only loves film a lot, but, like, has already established themselves as, like, this very well-respected person in the industry, when you hear this message about, like, hey, like, spectacle is a thing, but maybe not everything needs to be filmed, or maybe there's, like, issues that are there with what we choose to make movies about, or what kind of topics we choose to explore, like, you listen to that thing. And I think that's a really important part about it.
And a lot of the, like, going in hand with those themes is just, like, demanding respect. Because, like, in contrast with the Gordy's place, or was that what it's called? Gordy's
Home.
Gordy's Home.
Yeah.
In contrast with, like, the monkey losing his shit and killing people, you had Daniel Kaluuya's character on set with the horse being like, hey, guys, like, let me go over some rules. Like, please, like, don't look him in the eye. Like, be respectful. Don't freak him out. And then they freaked him out, and he didn't kill anybody. But sort of this, like, if you're gonna be using, especially, like, the natural world, you have to, like, have equal respect for it.
Yeah.
And that came back when it was like, oh, you can't look the horse in the eye, you can't look the alien in its face whole thing. But it's coming. It's interesting to have seen Nope talk about, needing respect and not needing to show everything on film, and not needing to, commercialize on every little thing that you can, and then seeing, like, the controversies like Netflix's Blonde and the Dahmer show, where it's like, oh, these are real people and they're not doing justice to their actual lives and actual stories.
Yeah, especially with the Dahmer stuff. Well, both of them. I know Dahmer, they just flat out didn't ask permission to some of the people who are depicted. Dahmer's family too. I think I read recently that Dahmer's dad is suing Netflix because he thinks they glorified his killings, and he's upset about that. He's like, no, now you're making it seem like my son did good things. Now, I didn't read the article, so don't, like, if I'm misquoting it, I'm an idiot, and I was just scrolling on Twitter. But that's interesting. And then, with Blonde and just the recent, like, Hollywood's obsession with biopics is insane. Like, I know for Blonde, there's a scene in there of her, like, speaking to her unborn fetus, and, like, it implies that she had an abortion, which she never did. Actually, Marilyn Monroe repeatedly miscarried and wanted to have a family so horribly. Like, she wanted children, and she just kept miscarrying and couldn't have a kid. So it's so, the respect thing is coming back. Like, when you're making a film about something, whether it's fictional or real, I think you need to show a level of respect for what you're like doing there, because whenever you make a film, it's going to reach such a wide audience. Like, a lot of people are going to say, I mean, Blonde's one of the most viewed, like, within its release weekend on Netflix, it was one of the most viewed movies. Dahmer is now, I think, the most viewed television series on Netflix. It's nuts.
Yeah, and it honestly just, like, to go off of that, I feel like that really ties into just, that bigger issue of, like, feel like right now Hollywood kind of has an issue with just exploitative media, like, yes, the Dahmer and Blonde, but if you think about it, I feel like on top of those, there have already been at least, like, 4 or 5 other portrayals of Marilyn Monroe and Jeffrey Dahmer. And that's not even to count, like, as you kind of touched on, Hollywood is obsessed with the biopic. Like, you've got all the TV shows, you've got, like, every movie is, like you've got these biopics and all the news is now like notable actor or actress is playing this person in this biopic. Like I feel like that's all the film.
Yeah, we're
news
getting
there
a
is,
second
you know?
Elvis biopic. Like
Yeah.
Why?
we just got the one with Austin Butler. Now they're having another one about Priscilla, which I mean that's a problem in itself because they completely glaze over the fact that she was a minor whenever they got into a relationship in the
Yeah.
Elvis movie. They were just like she was 14 and he was like what 23, 24 or something. Babe, that's not okay. Yeah. So,
And then also, like, you know, I saw some stuff in the news about The Crown, too, because I know Netflix, like, just released their promos about it. You know, the Queen just passed away, like, 2 months ago. And I saw that, like, you know, I think it was Judi Dench who was, like, demanding that Netflix, you know, like, at the very least put some sort of disclaimer in front of each episode that, like, very clearly states, you know, this is a, like, fictional take on the royal family, you know, just because if the show, you know, is gonna do things and portray these real life people, especially one that I think, you know, there's very increased sensitivity to right now, since it's so recent, since the Queen's passing, you know, like I think there's some fairness in wanting to, you know, really convey to the audience like, hey, this is fictional and like don't take that seriously. And I feel like that's just one story on top of so many.
What do you guys feel about like biopics or like films or media based off of real people taking liberties like that? Because I know that while working on, like for the Bohemian Rhapsody movie about Queen and Freddie Mercury, it was originally going to be Sacha Baron Cohen and not Rami Malek. But he left the project because he wanted to do, I guess for lack of a better word, a more honest story about Freddie. And like they touch on it a little bit in the movie, but like the like darker period where like the band had kind of broken up and he was like on drugs. And they wanted to like touch on that a little harder. And the band was like, no, you're not allowed to sully the name of Freddie or the band. And they couldn't come to an agreement and he left the project. And that movie ended up being the weird, you know, train wreck that it ended up being.
yeah.
So like, how do you guys feel about taking liberties like that?
I feel like when I say this, it's going to be like there's always like gray areas and it's hard to put like a blanket statement, but like as long as you're like maintaining like the integrity of who the person is, it can sometimes be okay to create these fictional parts of their lives as long as like it's not presenting them in a way that's different than what their like greater character is or who they actually are, if that makes sense. Like if someone's like already a quote unquote good person and you're just adding more like fictional stuff that is behind that, or if you're going to add some fictional stuff to like build character that is their character, I think sometimes that can be fine because, you know, like film is an art and there's a story in there. But I think if you're like taking these big strides to make it like an entertaining story, but then you're completely misrepresenting who's on stage. Like I think the biggest example that comes to mind that is not a great example of this is The Greatest Showman. I think that's an example where like creative liberties would not be appropriate.
Yeah, I feel like creative liberties are always overdone. Like at least in Hollywood, they always take the step that's too far. Like the Marilyn Monroe abortion scene. Like that's not who she was as a person. I think if you're doing a biopic, like the reason you're making it is because you want to educate people about that person. Mm-hmm. And I think if your goal, first of all, you shouldn't be making a biopic if your goal is to entertain people. That's not, I mean, it can be a secondary goal, but the main goal should be to educate people. And so, of course, as a filmmaker, you have to find a narrative in that because people don't get to see movies unless they're interesting. But it's not a documentary, you know, it's a fictional portrayal. But if you're adding stuff that just didn't happen in their life, I feel like you're not educating anyone on anything. You're just being like, aha, but this thing, what if it did happen? But it didn't. But like, you know, and then it carries the story. I don't think it's worth anything. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just cynical, but that's not to say I think there are biopics that are done well. I really loved Spencer. I thought Spencer was
Oh my God,
great,
it was
and
so
it was
awesome.
artistically like gorgeous. I am stupid and didn't know anything about Princess Diana before that. I mean, I know a little bit. I know what everyone knows, that, you know, John Mulaney killed her, but I didn't know anything, and I just think it was. I know that some people said that it focused too much on her eating disorder, which is interesting, but you know, everyone has a different opinion about these things. It's like, you know.
And I think, you know, there is that one side about, you know, kind of the exploitative media and like the spectacle that shouldn't be shown. But I think, you know, another component of, you know, what Nope's commentary is, it's not only, you know, spectacle that maybe shouldn't be shown, but just like the kind of obsession with spectacle in general right now in film, and how that's almost, you know, over dominating, you know, it sounds pretentious to say, but like the arguably like more artistic film. You know, I think there was obviously the huge, you know, press and talk when Martin Scorsese made his comments about, you know, Marvel and like amusement park cinema. And I think Nope, you know, the other kind of side of that coin is that it's commenting on spectacle in general, and how maybe there is just an obsession with just too much of that and not as much like other drive besides just the spectacle.
The part in Nope where the director of photography that they kind of hired out to help them like capture like video
Yeah,
of
I
the.
cannot for the life of me remember his name.
I can't
ever.
either.
Is
He
it
was a really
Hoyt van
fun
Hoytman?
character.
The cinematographer we're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the cinematographer.
Oh, you mean the character? Sorry,
character.
that's
Yeah,
the,
not
that's
the actual DOP.
cinematographer.
In the movie, the character that they
look
call
it
and are
up.
like, "Hey, can you help
The,
us?"
like Geek Squad dude.
Yeah. No. Like the guy who was on set when they were doing the commercial.
Oh, yeah, I got it. Yep.
He had that one scene where he had like, you know, the hand crank camera that he made, and then he was
Same
like,
as
"Oh, this
Antlers
is
Hoist.
Antlers Hoist." And there's that one scene where he's like, "Oh, this is the shot everyone dreams of," and he like runs up the mountain away from the safe like area they had created, and then he died. That almost feels like referential to like the death of the woman who was working on what's called Rust with Alec Baldwin, where it's like, is this
yeah.
picture, is this spectacle worth losing a life over?
Yeah.
Sort of
I
calling
don't
into
know
question.
If you guys saw, it was the 1 year anniversary of that incident earlier, and like earlier this week, I think.
Wow.
And Alec Baldwin just posted a picture of the person who died and just said 1 year ago today in the caption. And a lot of people were like, "What? what were you doing here, buddy?" But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're all good. It sort of feels like critiquing, you know, other movies that,
Yeah.
not other movies, but just like whether or not all of the lauded platform some of these movies have been put on is even worth it, or if they're worthy of their respect. And certainly if it's not worthy of losing somebody's life over.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it's not necessarily losing life. I think, you know, a very recent example that kind of touches on that from like a way to do it and a way not to do it was the recent releases of Top Gun Maverick, paralleled with the release of Jurassic World Dominion. You know, paralleled more in the sense of they both came out around the same times. They were both these, you know, reboots of a beloved 80s and 90s IP. You know, Jurassic World, yeah, it was the third one of this reboot, but nonetheless, it's the one where, you know, they get the old cast and they all come together, and they both came out around the same time, and they both got decent amount of box office, which I think we can talk about that in a second, but I think there was a vastly different, not only audience and critics response, but just in general, they're totally different in quality, and just Top Gun Maverick, I think, is a lot better film for a lot of reasons. And I think when you put them next to each other, the issues with Jurassic World relating to this whole spectacle thing become like glaringly obvious.
Yeah, no, Tom Cruise certainly has his flaws.
Yeah.
But it's really, really awesome to see somebody with the influence that he has pushing so hard for like practical effects and like, for lack of a better term, like just proper filmmaking. There's that whole opening sequence of Top Gun Maverick where Tom Cruise's character is flying that like experimental plane, and his higher ups are like, "Oh, we're gonna shut the program down and replace it with, you know, automatic drone controlled planes." Is so literally being like, "Fuck you, people that don't make movies right and just abuse their VFX artists. Like, as amazing as visual effects and CGI is as a tool, you can't make an entire movie that way. It's just one tool in your arsenal.
Yeah.
And they used it really well. Like, they didn't go into the mountains. They did all the maneuvers, but not in the dangerous situations they did them in. And like the dichotomy of that between the Jurassic World movie really shows, it's nice to see it pay off. That extra effort obviously paid off in the box office and in critical acclaim.
Yeah.
Which is just nice to see. Like, it could be argued that Top Gun Maverick is one of the most important movies of the summer.
Yeah. And I think it's like, while probably one of the biggest things about that movie is, like the practical effects and what they did with the planes, I feel like they didn't lose sight of the narrative and the characters, despite, that being probably their biggest thing. And I think that's probably one of the most important things in comparison to Jurassic World Dominion, where Jurassic World Dominion really suffers, because I think they were like, we've got the old cast together and it'll be like this sort of like endgame event with the like new characters, and you've got dinosaurs and it'll be awesome and it'll be great. And it kind of just was not great, like I watched it and I was like, this is so disappointing, because it really could have been something special if they, and it felt like they took the time to, go back to the drawing board and kind of figure something out, but they just kind of dropped the ball in the story, and they were like, here's some dinosaurs and some cool action scenes and your characters are together, but dialogue's bad and the story's bad, and it's just disappointing. And you can't just have quote unquote spectacle without a good like narrative, good story, good characters behind it, because otherwise it's just empty.
Yeah. And I'm so disappointed in myself, guys, because way back in the day, and Max, you'll relate to this because we talk about this all the time. Back in the day, Max and I were big Marvel fans. And we were like, Scorsese. Max wrote a whole paper on it.
I did two different things. In high school, I wrote an article about like, why Martin Scorsese is wrong about Marvel. And then literally last year, I did like a whole like 3-speech project for a class about why Marvel movies are cinema. And then like, I'll let Bristol finish the story, but I've really come around for a lot of reasons on that opinion.
Yeah, so I think it was Thor: Love and Thunder this summer that really took me out of it and made me realize that it's just spectacle. And also, I mean, Keller likes to talk all the time about Spider-Man: No Way Home and how it's just VFX. Like that, most of the actors weren't even in the same room together. But I just think like that, what you said, Max, about how there's no heart behind it really comes through. And Thor: Love and Thunder is the one that like socked me in the face, because I love Taika Waititi. Taika Waititi has been one of my like pedestal directors for a while. Like I've been watching his stuff. I love What We Do in the Shadows. I love Jojo Rabbit. I loved Hunt for the Wilder People. Like Thor Ragnarok was one of my favorite movies for a really long time. I think it's still up there because I think it is a good example of a Marvel film that feels like it has heart. And I think it's because Taika did have like some passion behind it when he was making it. And I think he must have just lost it for Love and Thunder, because it's just not there. The plot is so simple, so boring. It's not visually, and like their whole thing was making it visually interesting, and they somehow failed at that as well. And it's just,
and it's just so sad, because I feel like Marvel was almost this like titan of storytelling, like grand storytelling, like sure, they had the like cool visual effects and like these superheroes or whatever, but like, you could say that like they were very like renowned for creating this over like mapping story. And just to see them like very lately, not have these great stories anymore, or maybe they're more focused on the grand story than their own movies, which I feel like is a problem. Like it's upsetting, especially as someone who like loved that growing up and like, yeah, maturing more, growing new taste. But I really felt like I could continue to love Marvel, growing my like film knowledge and, film respect. And it's kind of dropped off, and it's upsetting.
I suspect that it's because of studio influence. Because like the MCU's like biggest accomplishment is the control they've managed to maintain over all their movies, which is the only reason that they can create this cohesive, universe of however many, like 23. How many movies are there in there now?
At least 30 by now.
A shit ton of movies
and
that are
TV
all
shows.
Yeah, and so their biggest feat was the control they maintained. And Kevin Feige did a good job of that in the early years. But as the market for it has grown, they've become more nitpicky with what they're controlling. And they're worried about satisfying the fans. They don't want to have people that have like a Last Jedi situation where they get angry that the characters are being used in a creative way, but not a way that they want. And so as their nitpicking gets greater, they end up with these boring movies like Love and Thunder, where like I can't confirm this, but I'm pretty sure that with Ragnarok, you know, the first Thor was kind of weird. The second Thor, everybody hated. Everybody that I've talked to. So they kind of just threw Ragnarok to this up and coming guy, and they said, like, you know, just see what happens. Do something weird. Maybe we can reset the franchise.
Yeah.
And holy
He
shit, did they?
Completely reshaped Thor as a character, because I think the reason Ragnarok succeeds so well, and it's also why Guardians of the Galaxy is one of the successful miniature trilogies. Well, it will be a trilogy of Marvel,
Hopefully
is
it's a successful
because
trilogy.
hopefully I guess we'll see what the third one is, that it embraces like the comic book feel that we all want, the fun, stupid, not relying on realism. Because when, in my opinion, when you try to rely on realism in a comic book adaptation, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot, because comic books rely on the fact that they are fantasy. Like, that is the very premise that they're built on, is that these guys have superpowers and they're crazy and da-ba-da-ba-da. But whenever you're like, oh no, let's try to make it gritty and interesting, it's like, what?
They call me Jeeg.
Yeah, exactly. We, like, you know, we all know what real life is like. We don't want to see that in the superhero movies. Like, we don't want to see like, oh, this is what it would really be like if they were a superhero. We want to see like there's a talking tree and a raccoon, and they all just go into space and they have a little silly time together, and it's fun. And it's, Ragnarok was literally like, there's a whole segment about the devil's anus. Like, that movie's so fun, and it's also comedy done well. I feel like Marvel comedy has really dropped off recently. It's all one-liners, and it's not fun anymore. Whereas like when you have like what Ragnarok did, was that combination of like good writing, that Taika knows how to write comedy. I mean, just watch all of his other movies, and you have actors who know comedy. Like, I think Tessa Thompson just really shines in that movie. She's fantastic, and it works. And now I mean, I haven't even kept watching the TV shows they're coming out with, because they're so
Don't even get me started
boring.
on
It's
the
just
TV
one-liners.
shows.
It's like, I think the last TV show I watched was, what was the one before Miss Marvel?
Loki? I don't know.
There was
Hawkeye?
one.
Moon Knight?
I watched Moon Knight.
Yeah.
Moon Knight was fine. I think the reason Moon Knight was fine is because it wasn't anything. It didn't relate to anything. It was separate, but it was just fine. It was, you know, they're all just like, it's about this guy. But like, why do we care about this guy? You know, that's what I feel like we need to get back to, is because for me, as a big person who, like, I loved these characters in middle school. I, like, loved these characters. The reason I loved them is because I found something in them that I was so empathetic towards. Like, Bucky Barnes, he was one of my big guys. I loved him. And I don't know, there was just something empathetic to me as a middle schooler who was, like, a little bit of a loner. I didn't really have friends, and I was a bit of an outcast. And this guy really was an outcast, and I related to that, and I liked that. And there was heart in that, and his story was interesting, because he had this whole, like, brainwashed and et cetera, et cetera. And now it's just like, he's a guy and he has the powers and he goes around and does the things. It's like, why do we care about him?
Yeah.
That's what needs to be there.
It's like too focused on, you know, the like flashy superhero, but also just like the output now. Like, I feel like there's this, you know, more issues with like making movies just to make money. And I know that's kind of like a thing of debate. Or like, I know recently, you know, Martin Scorsese had these comments at the New York Film Festival that like, he was like, you know, like the film industry has become so obsessed with like box office numbers rather than, you know, quality or whatever. And I feel like not only, you know, is like Marvel and like with Jurassic World Dominion, you know, they put out these movies that sure make like a shit ton of money, but aren't that great, which is upsetting. But also like with Marvel, I'm pretty sure that they've already made in the past like 2 years post Endgame more like hours of film with their TV shows and movies than the entirety of their like movies pre-Endgame, from like Iron Man to Endgame. And it's just
Really?
like, well, yeah, like when you think
Like,
about
that's
that,
a real statistic?
I think so. Like with like, you know, all the TV shows, that's
Yeah.
like 6 hours each one. With like the 7-8
And they
movies
still
they've
haven't
made,
figured out how to pace
you know,
the TV shows.
they still haven't figured
They
that
made
out.
so many, and they still don't know how to accurately take a movie format and put it in a television show, but keeping the pacing good.
Because
Yeah.
they're just churning them out as
Yeah.
fast as
Yeah,
possible.
like you sit back and you're just like, wow, they really just put out so much content in 2 to 3 years. And it's like, are you really focused on telling a story and like doing stuff for quote unquote your fans, or are you just trying to put out as much as you can to make a lot of money?
I think they need to, like Kevin Feige and the studio needs to take a step back and worry about the big picture, the macro, like the plan of all the movies. And then they need to assign the movies to people like Taika Waititi or James Gunn or Chloe Zhao. Like, I thought Eternals was fucking awesome. Yeah. It was super different. It was very character driven, but they didn't market it at all, so nobody saw it. But like what the Harry Potter franchise did in its early years, and like I know J.K. Rowling is kind of an asshole, but that franchise as a film franchise is incredible. The thing it was able to accomplish as early as it did. But they gave Chris Columbus the first two, and then Alfonso Cuarón, and like they had these really cool movies made by really cool people, and then eventually they shifted to David Yates. And he's, you know, a fine director. He made good Harry Potter movies, but then like the spark was gone, and the movies didn't have their own flair and their own like character. And the last chunk of the whole franchise ended up being, you know, consistent, but to me at least, way less interesting. Yeah. And so I think that if the MCU is able to find up and coming new people that have, you know, a vision and a style and something unique, like they could have done it with Multiverse of Madness with my boy Sam Raimi, but again, I suspect that the studio influence was too great and they limited any of the creativity he would have had from behind the director's chair.
Definitely what happened.
But with how much content they're producing, if they're able to diversify the things they're making and make it interesting and unique, then they can pull in an even greater audience. They already have the core of the fanboys that are going to come to every movie at midnight on the day it comes out. I think they'd be left off with much more interesting and better products. And at this point in their stage, like, they're just making too many things to stick to this one boring conventional style.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone's going to burn out. Like, I know this is a thing that like I experienced a while ago, and now you guys are experiencing as well. And I think it's a broad, you know, trend.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what made the early days of Marvel so, like, at least it was enjoyable. Like the diversity in it. Like, I keep coming back to what was the movie that Guardians of the Galaxy and The Winter Soldier both came out like within a year of each other, and they are shockingly different films. I mean, The Winter Soldier is basically like a spy drama, and at the core of it has this like story about these two friends who, you know, fell apart and they've come back together, and it's got some heart in it. And then Guardians is just fun and shits and gigs the whole time. And I feel like that really shows that if they did, like, you know, go a little funky with it, it would be cool. But now they're just like, it's a TV show about a guy, and the guy gets his powers, and then with his powers, he finds another guy who doesn't like that he has powers. Like, okay, I'm bored. Thanks.
Yeah. And I feel like, you know, they're struggling a lot with the narrative and just like being as consistent as they were. But there's like this whole other issue that I think like Marvel is really the biggest, you know, I guess like hot topic, or the biggest kind of, what's the word? The biggest like wrongdoer in this sense, you know, tying it back to spectacle that they're so focused on is, you know, the visual effects in their movies and visual effects in general in the film industry right now. You know, I think Keller was touching on, you know, like with something like Top Gun Maverick, you know, like you use practical effects for the most part, but like you don't rely on CGI and effects like that for your entire movie. You know, you can use it to touch up, or, you know, if there's a scene that you can't do it any other way, sure, do that. But, you know, you're not necessarily relying on it for the whole thing. I feel like not only with Marvel releasing, you know, globs of content now, there's an issue with, sure, the effects that, you know, we see as an audience member, you know, if it's not realistic, like it's like, all rats, like I'm unimmersed from the film. But it's this bigger issue in the film industry of the treatment of visual effects artists, you know. And while this is kind of maybe its own topic relating to, you know, this idea of like spectacle in film and all of that, it's a really big issue that's going on. And I feel like, you know, lately it's been getting some light, but like dating all the way back to, you know, probably earlier than this, but at least as early as like 2012-ish. There's this documentary that came out in 2014 called Life After Pi. And it was talking about the visual effects company, I believe it was called Rhythm and Hues, who did the VFX for Life of Pi, which if you've seen it, you know, it's like really crazy, the stuff they did, you know, with like Richard Parker, the tiger, who's there for like the entirety of the movie basically, but just all of the animals in there. Like, it's like stunning work. So you're like, wow, this is super impressive.
And even before Life of Pi, they were like groundbreaking within the industry. They won a
Yeah.
bunch of technical awards way before that as well.
Yeah, like Rhythm and Hues was like a huge name in like VFX companies. And as the documentary tells, Life of Pi pretty much, I believe, put them out of business. After Life of Pi came out and before the Oscars, they went bankrupt. They filed for bankrupt. The company was no longer there. All the employees, were put off. And then the Oscars come around and Life of Pi wins for visual effects, which, there's already irony in there with, the winners of this, arguably the most prestigious film award for visual effects artists. They win this, but if you go back and you watch the video of them accepting it, that was their platform to talk about this issue, to, talk about the treatment of visual effects artists, and they were musicked off. They were ushered off with like the Jaws theme. And it's like a really big issue. And I feel like Marvel is one of the biggest proponents now of mistreatment of visual effects artists.
Yeah, the poor VFX studios overwork all of their employees and they send them into like crunch time like the video game industry does, all so that, they can make fake trees for Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah.
Instead of just putting Jon Favreau and, what's Spider-Man's name? Tom Holland on an actual like location. Like
Yeah.
it's just
It's
like not only
stupid.
is it lazy and bad filmmaking, but they're like these are like labor rights violations
Yeah.
for these poor VFX artists who are artists. Like the stuff they do is legitimately incredible.
Yeah.
But it's being misused artistically speaking, misused, financially speaking, and then they're being mistreated. I know a lot of those studios are trying to unionize and they're having a lot of pushback from Disney. I don't know if Disney specifically, but like studios and then the companies themselves are all trying to prevent this. But
And I always just sit back and I'm just like, Disney is like arguably the richest film industry. Like they've got Star Wars on their back and Marvel on their back and they've got all their other stuff. And you watch these films and you're like, you would think that with the like most like money making movie industry out there, they would be able to, have these good effects. But, as you dig deeper, you realize what's going on. Because I'm pretty sure in the documentary, they talk about how I think the way, at least at that time, that film effects was that visual effects artists get paid, like the company gets paid for like 500 shots or something like that they have to do the work on. But, they do these 500 shots and let's say the director comes back and it's like, I don't like this. I want this to be changed. Or, we want to do a complete overhaul of this. You need to change this. They're not getting paid extra for that because they're just getting paid to do the 500 shots that they were laid out to do. And so they're forced to work so much overtime because, there are deadlines with this film that was supposed to come out because these are, re-edits and stuff. And so they end up working like these like 100-hour weeks, like just putting in so much time into these shots and not getting paid for it. I think one big example that kind of, I don't know if people talked about it too much, but with the Sonic movie, like, the first trailer came out of that and it was like everyone made fun of the designs, it was like, oh my gosh, what happened to Sonic? Like, why does he look like that? And it was like this crazy thing, and what it looked like the industry did was like, oh, they saw that the fans didn't like it. And so they went back and they changed the design and they made everybody happy. But I'm pretty sure that VFX studio also went out of business because they had to do all of those redesigns and, they weren't getting paid and they were overworked. So it's like a really big issue that I don't think is getting as much spotlight as it should be.
Yeah. This is slightly off topic, but it's on topic. I want to circle back because I'm remembering in Nope, something that makes me think is just the use of consumption as like a literal metaphor. You know what I mean? Because I feel like it always comes back to like, unfortunately, we're consumers, And it's that whole thing with like, supporting movies. Like, what do you choose? Your money is like, you are literally like metaphorically voting on what movies you want to see produced by what movies you go and see and put your money towards. Like, if you go and only see every Marvel movie, then they're going to keep making absolute shit. But if you go and put your money down for like, the fun stuff coming out, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Nope, everything else that has come out that has been fantastic so far this year, then you're showing that that is what you as a person who spends your money wants to see, and more movies like that get made. And I think Nope, there's a lot in there and it's still hard to digest. Like, I still have been thinking on it since it came out. Like the whole thing with Jupe, Steven Yeun's character, and literally when he is like presenting the, like, what is it, the starlight experience or something, to his like crowd of people, he's like, there are these aliens here and I call them the viewers. And I just can't stop thinking about that. That's gotta be a commentary on like how, I don't know, something about us as people who we want to watch this crazy shit. We're the reason it gets made. Like, people watch Blonde and Dahmer and The Crown, and that's the reason that it continues to come out and we continue to get this exploitative crazy stuff, is because there's a market for it and we consume it like Jean Jacket, the alien in the movie, consumes the people. Anyway,
consuming
there's so
the people
much there.
who watch
exactly
them in reverse, you know?
Yeah, like it's like I said, it's so dense, it's so hard. Like in my brain, I'm like, oh, there's so many things, but it's like literally the product. We are consuming the product, and the product is consuming us. It's crazy. The movie is really good. Go see it if you haven't.
But no, yeah, there is definitely a market for these blockbusters.
Yeah.
And there are like this sect of actual artists making stuff, like Denis Villeneuve, is that how you say his name?
Yeah, I think so.
With Blade Runner 2049 and with his new Dune movie. And Robert Eggers just made The Northman, which was kind of like a big like action style kind of blockbuster, which was a departure from what he's usually done. And Top Gun Maverick isn't quite on the same caliber as those. Like, it got a lot of attention and was actually made properly. People want these big movies.
Yeah,
but I don't think the cool ones are being, advertised properly.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. And I was just going to say, like, it's my hope that people really go and support a lot of these things. Like, I think one of the most exciting things that I saw about like a film like Everything Everywhere All at Once was that I think it was like A24's highest grossing movie.
Yeah.
And you see stuff like that and it's like, people do want to see this kind of stuff, but you just got to like remember to support it. And also the film industry needs to, remember to take note of that and put more marketing towards movies like that. Because, I do think that there are a lot of really creative, inventive, and good movies being made right now, but sometimes it's just maybe that studio doesn't think they should spend money to market it when maybe they should.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like marketing nowadays makes or breaks a film. Whether you get, like, for example, The Woman King just came out. I work in a movie theater. The Woman King just came out, and nobody came to see that movie. And everyone who came to see it was like, this is insanely good. Viola Davis is crazy amazing. Like, this is a really good film.
Who's an easy to market person.
Yeah,
like,
Viola Davis is
huge.
everyone loves Viola Davis. But
Yeah.
they did not market. I didn't hear about that movie until like 3 days before. Like, I was working a shift 3 days before its opening weekend, and I was like, oh, what's this? And I looked it up. And I take it back. I did hear about it, but it was because my roommate got to see them work on the composition of the film in Ireland or something. But that was, I forgot about it. She mentioned that and I forgot about it. And then I was like, oh, okay. And no one came to see it. And apparently it was a fantastic movie. I didn't get time to go see it, but
yeah, I saw like one trailer for it in a movie, but like nothing on like, Twitter or Instagram. Like, I'm on film, Twitter, and Instagram. So like, if anybody's going to get them, it's going to be us.
I know. So.
But that reminds me also of like, I don't know if you guys know anything about The Empty Man. It's this like horror movie that recently came out, like an independent horror movie, and people, who saw it like raved about it, and the distributors just like totally didn't give it a platform. Like they didn't give it a physical media release at all. Like, you can't get that on physical media. I think they took it off like HBO Max and the streaming platforms. And you see stuff like that happen to these really good movies, and it's just like, it's a shame. It's a shame. But
yeah, I mean, studios need to put their money where their mouth is. If they believe in a movie, they need to, back it so that it can have the opportunity to be successful. I don't remember who was saying it, but I saw like a really good interview excerpt where somebody in the industry was talking about how studios need to be more comfortable with losing money, at least at first, on some of their like more indie, wings or their like, subdivisions that make more artistic, more like independent, smaller budget stuff. They need to be okay with sinking more money into it so that it can get its name out there and they can get some momentum going. So that then in the future they can be more profitable. Think about how much attention A24 has paid attention to their branding and their marketing and stuff, and they've got like a whole like cult following now.
Yeah, and A24 has made some shit movies.
Yeah, no, I mean they've got some bangers and they've got their misses.
The thing is that they did allow for those people to make those movies, and I mean, the argument can be made that A24 should market better, but they allowed for those people to make those garbage movies, and now they're getting to pump out bangers like Lady Bird and Hereditary and all this crazy shit. So,
and then it's also like things like that it's just like when studios do give chances to these up and coming filmmakers, it makes it so much more. I don't know if appealing is the right word, but just much more encouraging as people who want to go into film and make movies. If you see these smaller movies being really like held up and supported by these industries, it's like it encourages people to make more movies, to be more creative, so that you can get more of these artistic movies, or more of these like just like really gripping stories. If you support independent movies like that, you will get more of that, not only in people who support it, but people who want to make that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the market's definitely more saturated now than it ever has been before. But for that reason, there's even less of an excuse to be putting out, a not very carefully made or like just like cash grab content, because it would be so easy for studios to do the Apple TV Plus method, which is just to go to festivals to find really cool art pieces that are already made and just buy them and distribute them.
Yeah.
I don't know why like Peacock is, making all these garbage TV shows and movies just as cash grabs when they could just be paying independent artists the same or less, honestly, probably money, and then get like actual accolades and get them a platform. And like, that's how they got Coda. Like Coda was purchased at Sundance, and it won Oscars because Apple was, they supported the artist. And it's an interesting way to like jumpstart their streaming service anyway. But it seems, more sustainable, more like conscious, I guess, for lack of a better word.
More supportive, and more sustainable for the future.
Also, just cooler.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Palm Springs was purchased at something by Hulu.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite movie.
But go support more than just Marvel, and go watch. Just go buy tickets and watch like some cool independent bangers.
I think that's a fantastic
more than just spectacle.
Ending point for us.
More than just spectacle.
Yes, more than just spectacle. Awesome. Well, all right. Any other final comments? Okay.
Thank you guys so much for listening or watching, depending on what service you're on.
Yeah, you can check us out, the SoundStage, wherever you can find podcasts.
We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Spotify. We are on Google Podcasts. We will be uploaded to YouTube with the video portion.
But yeah, be sure to tune in. We'll be having more podcast episodes in the future, various topics, various people. So be sure to stay tuned and continue to check us out.
Yeah, and if you are a CFC student who is a part of the film club and you're interested in producing a podcast episode, email us. Reach out to us. We got you.
Thank you so much.